Hey Emma,
Yes, Madeline.
what do you call it on Halloween when you're dressed up as an apparition and you don't give someone a treat?
I don't know. What do you call it?
A ghost trick. Hello and welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I am your spectral host, Madeline.
I'm your stoat host, Emma.
Your what host?
Your stoat.
Oh, from right. I was like, what is stoat? Do you mean
It's an animal.
Do you mean stout?
Stoat.
And thanks for tuning into the show. This week, it's spooky games. Horror games. Not really.
Well, sort of.
It's appropriate for mid-March, the spookiest time of year.
Yeah.
Because this week we're going to be talking about Ghost Trick, Phantom Detective, and Inscryption. I was so excited to play Inscryption, and then I couldn't.
Oh, is it not on Mac?
It is not on Mac.
Did you try to get your phone to run Ghost Trick Phantom
I sure
Detective?
did. I sure did play some Ghost Trick Phantom Detective, turning me into a mobile gamer. Who would have thought?
Yeah.
So let's start there. Let's start with our old game. I feel like it's been a while since I've played the old game for the show.
Yeah, I think so.
A lot of new games that I'm still working my way through. Not a lot of old games.
King of Fighters was the old game, right?
It was, wasn't it? I'm not going to revive that joke from last week. You can go back and listen to last week's show if you want to hear me say King of Fighters like 20 times. And then the show before that if you want to hear me say King of Fighters in a more serious way like 20 times.
Yeah.
But this week the old game is Ghost Trick Phantom Detective, which is an spooky adventure game from Capcom for the Nintendo DS, which also has an iOS port. When I was playing, I really thought to myself, this is very dumb. I'm about to out myself as very dumb. You know, you have to tap the phone screen to do things. And I was like, oh, that's funny. Like, they had to adjust this for phone where you have to tap the screen to do things instead of playing the game. And then I thought to myself this morning, wait a minute, the Nintendo DS. I understand now.
Yeah, I think probably is mostly the presentation that had to be slightly adjusted, not the actual gameplay, so.
Well, even the presentation is not really adjusted. They've just added a banner on the side so that the screen is the size of, well, I really don't think that my phone is as big as the DS screen, but it's the same, what am I trying to say, dimensions as Nintendo DS.
I just meant that your phone does not have two screens.
That's true. Or does it?
Maybe it does. Maybe your phone is one of those, like, bendy smartphone.
Foldy smartphone.
Yeah.
I should probably try that with my phone and see what happens.
Yeah.
Anyway, Ghost Trick Phantom Detective is developed, I said by Capcom, but led by Shu Takumi, who is the creator and creative mind behind Ace Attorney. So all the reviews are like, the Ace Attorney guy, the next thing from Ace Attorney, what could follow up Ace Attorney?
To be fair, that is his main thing, yeah.
I know, but they were also like, oh man, this guy makes such weird games. A game about a lawyer? A game about a ghost detective? Who would have thought?
This is the 2010, the early 2010s of, wow, Japan's so weird in games journalism, so.
I just thought it was particularly striking how everyone was like, who would have ever thought to make a game about a lawyer? It's like, I don't know. Doesn't seem like that weird.
It's just like one step off from detective, and everybody does detectives, right?
But then they were like, here's another weird one. A detective, but it's a ghost.
Yeah.
Anyway, in Ghost Trick Phantom Detective, you play as recently dead Ghost. All the reviews were like, here's the guy's name. I've played through about a chapter and a half of this game. The guy does still not know his name. So, the respect for the spoilers of the main character's name, just saying.
Well,
I'm just joking, but
I just mean Maybe that's not as much of a spoiler as you think it is. That's all.
I'm not thinking it's that much of a spoiler. I just thought it was funny that I was like, this is a big deal that this guy does not remember his own name so far in my playthrough. And all the reviews are like, Sissel, the recently dead guy, Sissel. And I was like, I guess that's his name.
Mm-hmm.
But he's dead. He's recently dead in very, like, embarrassing sort of fashion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very booty up death posture, which is also the app icon for the game.
Yeah.
Just this dead guy, like, very undignified pose.
I think that's like the design that was on like the DS card too.
I saw that, but on the DS card, he's standing above it as a ghost, looking cool. And on the thing, it's just his dead body.
I feel like that's more accurate.
Look, it was funny. Every time I look at it, I'm like, what is that app? And then I'm like, oh yeah, it's Ghost Trick. So you're dead, and you wake up in the middle of somebody else getting shot. Like, you're dead in the junkyard, and there's an assassin, and this other mysterious young woman, and you watch her die. But with the help of a friendly desk lamp spirit named Ray, you discover that you have the ability to perform ghost tricks, hence the title, and possess objects and move between them in order to affect change in the world. And you also have the ability, when you find a recently dead body, to jump into that 4 minutes before that person died and potentially change the flow of events. So time loop game before time loop game was cool.
Yeah, sorta.
I mean, if you fail. If you're good at the
Yes.
game, it's not a time loop.
Well, there's one loop, right? A singular one.
That's usually how it goes.
Yeah.
I guess you get to jump back. You're right. You go backward. It's a time travel game.
Yes.
And so, like, that's basically the main mechanic of the game, is Rube Goldberging your way through stuff to be able to do the right things and save someone from certain death.
I was reading one interview, which there's a lot of interviews that's like, this is so weird, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
But one of the things was like, it felt like there's like some like sort of platforming elements to the puzzle solving, which I thought was actually an interesting way to put it. Because you only have a certain reach in your ghost form. So whatever object that you're in, to get to the next object, you have to be able to actually reach it, which often involves like either interacting with other things to move the position of objects or waiting for the correct timing in a moving object to get into that object and then to let it move you somewhere else.
Yeah, it's really the timing puzzles that, to me, make that platforming description feel apt. To me, when I think of platforming, I think of the frustration of missing a jump.
Mm-hmm.
And while I totally get that description from, there is a limited range, you can only, go from one to the other. Time doesn't pass when you're in the ghost world form. So I was like, okay, like, that's not really platforming. That's just dragging your finger around the screen. But that is really true. I've only had one puzzle like that so far in the game, where you had to, activate a fan and a blender at the same time to move a flag up, like a rope
pole
thing. It wasn't a pole. It's like a pulley system.
Okay. That is how flags go up poles.
Okay, fine,
you're
Emma.
wondering.
You're right.
I didn't raise the flag like every morning in elementary school to not understand how flags go up poles, Madelyn.
Fair enough. Anyway, if that description doesn't give you the idea of the Rube Goldberg machine, I don't know what will. But yeah, in that one, it was a little bit like, oh my god, I have to time this right. And that does feel like platforming in sort of a weird... It would be bad. Imagine if people were like, a platformer from Capcom. Puzzle-solving platformer. But it does capture some of that feeling. That's an interesting take.
Yeah, I thought so.
I liked also there was an interview where the producer of the game described Takumi as trying to create a game his mother would enjoy playing. And that's where Ace Attorney and this comes from. Like, with the idea of it could be enjoyed by, hardcore and casual gamers. But I was like, yes, Ghost Trick obviously appeals to the moms.
Yeah, I read one they were trying to make sure the puzzles weren't too hard, so they give it to their producer every time they make a puzzle and like tell him to go away so that he can't ask for help. And if it takes him more than 2 hours, they know it's too hard.
I thought for a minute that was going to be the producer is terrible at games. So if
he doesn't play very many games is the thing.
How do you end
That's
up
why
as a
they had him
producer
test
at
it.
Capcom and not? I guess if you're playing games, maybe you can. But this is not you at all. I guess if you're playing games all day at work, maybe you don't want to play more games when you go home.
I don't think producers play that many games at work either, though. So
then why is he working at Capcom?
Producers don't work on the game per se.
I know,
So.
but it just feels like you could make a lot more money with those skills somewhere else.
I guess so.
Anyway, I do think it's funny. The game was originally going to be titled Ghost Spy, and then at some point he wasn't a spy anymore, and they were like, "Oh, can't be that." But
Yeah.
Ghost Spy sounds like a fun game too.
Harder to say, though, I feel like.
That's true.
There's
Well,
a lot
Ghost
of
Trick
S's.
is apparently a pun because, or so an interview tells me, trick sounds sort of similar to the Japanese word for possess. So it's like a fun joke for them. For me, it's just a funny sounding title.
Yeah.
So Ghost Trick had decent reviews and has really been listed, I think, as among the best games to come out on the DS in hindsight for a lot of people, particularly because it really makes use of the touchscreen and the DS elements, which really does seem to be the marker of the best games on the DS. In hindsight, or people are like, the ones that actually use the DS.
Yeah.
Which I guess is not
shocking.
Surprising. But it did not sell very well. It won an award at some publication of best game no one played.
Yeah.
The year it came out. So there's not been another Ghost Trick. He went back to Ace Attorney, and there's no more ghosties. Not even the discussed crossover where Phoenix Wright dies and Sissel prosecutes his killer, which I read about in one interview.
That would be fun.
I guess. Dark.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't played any of the Ace Attorneys really, so I can't say.
But, there's murders.
I mean, I know that. I did know that. I just thought it would be especially dark to have the Ace Attorney murdered, but I don't know. Overall, I'm enjoying so if you're interested in Ghost Trick Phantom Detective, I guess you can break out your Nintendo DS, or it's available, there's a free trial on the App Store. I was so excited because, of course, the app is listed as free, and I was like, the game's free? Great! But you can play the first 2 chapters. I think there are 18 chapters overall. You can play the first 2 chapters for free, which is nice, right? I think it's you get to decide whether you are enjoying the game. I feel like I've gotten so far I played the first chapter and I sort of started the second chapter a little bit. I've gotten a good idea of what the game is going to be like. I haven't gotten to really sort of free play yet too much. The first level is sort of more of a tutorial where your hand is pretty held through it. Although it was still stressful trying to figure out how to literally drop a wrecking ball on an assassin. I still almost didn't make it. But it's been fun. I've been enjoying it. I am not sure. It's really because I am not a phone gamer that I am debating whether or not to continue when I get to the end of my trial. I think if this was on, of course the touchscreen makes it hard to put it anywhere else, right? But I think even if this was on the Switch, it would be worth spending I think it costs $10 to unlock the full rest of the game. I think if it was on the Switch, or not that it really could be on the PlayStation in the same way, but if it could be on the PlayStation in the same way, I think I'd easily be like, oh yeah, $10, sure, why not? I'll play the rest of this.
Technically, both those things have touchpads.
Yeah, I don't really consider the PlayStation to have a touchpad.
Has more of one than the Xbox, at least.
I guess that's true. PlayStation supremacy, you're right.
Your phone is also really old and tiny, right?
Oh my god, everybody, stop giving me a hard time about my ancient phone.
I'm not giving you a hard time. I'm just saying that maybe if you had, like, an iPad or just a bigger phone, it might also be easier to work with.
I can't believe you're telling me to get a new phone.
I'm not telling you to get a new phone. I'm just saying
anytime
your phone
anything
is very
with my
little.
phone runs a little weird or a little slow, like my boyfriend's like, oh my god, your phone's a relic. It's like, so what that it's almost 6 years old?
Couldn't you get a new one for free at this point?
It doesn't work that way. You get a new one for free.
Okay.
I'll get a new one when it dies. I'm just like, oh, I don't want to transfer all of my apps and all of my stuff. Like, it's such a hassle.
Anyway, I think it's really generous that it gives you 2 chapters for free.
Well, I think it's a good hook. I don't know. Spending $10 on a phone game is a lot in this day and age, right? I mean, it's not for, like, a real game, of course, but in the mobile games market, a $10 upfront cost for a game, you know, is, like, a lot when you could just play Candy Crush.
Yeah.
So I think it's smart to pretend to people that it's free and get them hooked on the funny character design and stuff before asking them to pay. It was fascinating to me. Fascinating. I was supposed to say not fascinating. Of course it was interesting. How many of the reviews talk about the joy of puzzle games and adventure games like this in the exact same way? Mm-hmm. The aha moment was so ubiquitous across these. I found that really interesting because, of course, that's really central to these sorts of games. But man, that must be a sort of a hard thing to design.
Yeah. I mean, you get a lot of people to play it, is basically what you do.
I'm fascinated by puzzles in general, right? It's like, even with, like, I imagine there's no thought that goes into this, right? But, like, is there thought to the way that even puzzles that you do on your table are cut together, right? Like, are there better ways of cutting those or worse ways, given the kind of standard puzzle shapes? Is there any thought that goes into that? Or is it just like, here's the art, stamp, here are the puzzles, go. But obviously it's even more complicated when it's not just like, I'm putting my puzzle pieces together and who cares. But I'm sort of interested about, like, okay, how do you make a game like this fun? Because I enjoyed my first chapter, even though it was kind of like hand-holdy what I was supposed to do.
Something they said, it was from Joystick, but it's on Engadget now, the interview, because it became that. But they asked him about how they went about designing the puzzles, because the way Ghost Trick works, right, is there's a whole bunch of objects, like, in a room that you interact with. Like, each object has its own, like, trick that can happen, or not even all the objects, but some objects that you can possess.
So when you go into ghost mode, you can see, like, you are kind of a glowing blue spirit ball.
Yeah.
And you can't interact with your own corpse, but you can interact with other corpses to jump into their memories. And then, like, once you're in that space, or just otherwise, the way you move around is by jumping from, like, little blue dots on objects to little blue dots. But like Emma said, you have a limited range of how far you can go. So I can't just be like, which is kind of lame, right? Like, what a sucky ghost setup where it's like you can't even just float around the way you want, right? It's not lame from a gameplay perspective. I just mean, like, it's a bad deal. If I'm going to be a ghost, I better at least be able to, like, haunt what I want, right? But anyway.
You can travel through phone lines, so.
That's true, and that is the only
That's your main way of traveling great distances.
Like, I can't go just to the handles on the bicycle without going through the pedals, but I can, like, just go through a phone line. Sure.
I guess because it's, like, straight.
That's an interesting theory.
Anyway, Shitakumi was saying that they had, like, a foreign book with, like, pictures of objects and their names. So, he said it was called, like, Wordsworth, so the interviewer was like, Little Einstein's Wordsworth Book of Words, which is very funny that they just had, like, this big, like, picture book full of stuff that they would just, like, flip through, and it's like, oh, that's a cool thing. Can we put that in this level? Where does this object go? Which just seems like, I mean, it's very unique to this game in that those are very central to how the puzzles work. But it's an interesting way to break down design, I guess, by figuring out what objects you put in each level.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see, at least even if I only play through the second chapter, I'll be interested to see how objects in a more curated environment are put together. The first level takes place in a junkyard, which of course basically allows you can put anything in a junkyard, right?
Yeah.
Now, granted, they put in sort of like normal junkyardy things, right? There's a broken blender, there's a bicycle, there's a wrecking ball, right? But it's like, oh, okay, like those are all just in like a pile of junk, so you can kind of put them wherever you want. Not to be like, oh, I see how this one was relative or should have been relatively easy to design, because of course a tutorial world has its own severe challenges, I'm sure. But it was interesting to me thinking about it of like, oh, okay, but like this could, like you could have any objects here and that would be fine. I'm now in like the head assassin's, well, I don't know, he's probably not an assassin, the head rich guy's office, bopping around, and I'll be interested to see if the puzzles, still feel like they work when it's not just like, yes, from trash to trash that can be anywhere, the trash.
I don't remember how the chapters break down, but I'll be curious if the second one is what I think it is, the one with the dog, I think that you will be hooked upon it.
I would like a ghost dog, and I already saw that happens. But
yeah.
A ghost dog for me, please.
Yeah, there's a Pomeranian named Missile that is designed after Shu Takumi's dog, in fact. Who was also a Pomeranian named Missile.
Oh, wow.
And is now immortalized forever in Ghost Trick.
So I really thought that Missile was just named that because it was like Sissel and Missile, but you're telling me that they came up with the dog first that had a real name, and then they were like, we have to name the protagonist Sissel.
I think so, yeah.
Iconic. Incredible.
I think that should be every game developer's like goal, is to create a game where they can just like put their dog in it.
Pretty much.
Yeah. And it's like that then the dog lives forever in the game.
I approve of that.
Yeah.
I don't think we really talked about, like, so in the game you're a ghost detective. You're a phantom detective. We didn't really talk about like what the game is about. We were just like,
yeah, we can talk about the plot.
You ghost
I mean,
around.
we talked about the gameplay.
Yeah.
So
you're a dead dude. You discover that the young woman who you saved from dying at the hands of a hitman who was like looking at your body is a detective. I guess, I mean, I don't know. You probably weren't a detective in life, right? Given that you were shot by an assassin and
you don't remember anything about yourself when you awaken as a ghost.
But you eventually discover that this young woman is a detective, and also once you've saved her life, you're like, oh yeah, heck yeah, I'm gonna go around saving people's lives. But also, when day comes, you are going to disappear. So, like, Ray is like, go around investigating mysteries and help people. This is the one thing I ask of you. Ray, the spirit desk lamp, by the way, in case you didn't remember that.
It is also to try to figure out a little bit more about who you are in the process.
So, Mystery Man with no name goes like, yeah, I can't promise to do that. I actually don't want to disappear, so I'm going to do that instead. And Ray's like, that's fine. Like, that'll be good enough. Ray's sus, man.
He is a talking desk lamp, so. Also, I mean, slight spoiler, but look forward to Lynn dying constantly.
Right, yeah, I mean, I kind of figured. That's fine.
Just remember, look forward to entering a scene and being like, Lynn, are you dead again?
Do you think Ghost Trick will ever be revived?
I don't know. Shu Takumi, I think he did some work on Monster Hunter recently, but his last big game that he actually worked on was the Great Ace Attorney ones, which were actually made in like 2015, 2017. And we're just, but those got a localization, so literally anything is possible. So, could one day go back to Ghost Trick. But I do think he was able to do this because he had made, you know, some very successful Ace Attorney games and had some sway and oomph in the company that he perhaps does not have as much of now.
Well, on that downer note, should we talk about Inscryption?
Wait, no. My favorite fact about Ghost Trick is, so it does have like sprite art when characters are talking to each other, but the events that you're trying to prevent every time you do go back in someone's dead body and try to change the past are animated through really charming character animation. Because while you're doing the ghost tricks, right, like time passes, so you'll see the events happening as characters move around and do things that influence what you have to do. So the way that they did this, a lot of people originally thought like, oh, it's rotoscoped, because of like the sort of smoothness of the animation.
Yeah, it's super smooth.
So rotoscoping's, my understanding of rotoscoping is like you sort of draw over real people moving. Sort of, it's like a primitive form of motion capture, essentially. But it is not rotoscoped. Instead, what they did is they made 3D models of all these characters, animated the scenes in 3D, and then rendered them as 2D animation. And that's where the sort of unique look of its animation comes from, which I think really helps sell the charm of this game, is in this really fun animation that they've put together.
Definitely. It's already really charming, and just, I played like 45 minutes of it. And the Phantom Detective's got dope hair.
So. He does. So it goes straight up.
That was another thing I saw mentioned in a review, that Takumi is like, he's not the artist, but like he approves the designs. And so someone was talking about how it's like, it's really important to him that the silhouette is the most important thing to him, that he thinks the silhouette is what makes a memorable character. And it's like, well, this guy's certainly got a silhouette.
Yeah. I mean, part of it is because it's on such a small screen, right?
Right.
So details are harder to make out, but if you have really strong, memorable silhouette, you'll be able to associate those with the characters.
So are we cosplaying the Phantom Detective at PAX? Do the hair? Do you think you can do it?
I don't think I have enough hair to do it.
I don't know what product you would need. You would need some spectral energy, I think.
Just glue.
Just glue, you're right. So now, are you ready for Inscryption?
Yeah, let's talk about Inscryption.
All right. So Inscryption, an October 2021 roguelike card game, among many other things, from Daniel Mullins and Devolver for PC. Every review was like, don't read this review, play the game.
Yeah, so probably slight spoilers for Inscryption, just in terms of, like, the concept. So if you really want to go into Inscryption knowing literally nothing about Inscryption, you should probably not.
It's basically too late for that, isn't it? I don't know. I felt like, in just looking up the game, like, reading anything about the game...
Well, some people don't look up the game. Sometimes people's friends say, hey, play Inscryption, and then they just play it, you know?
Okay, fair enough. So if you're listening, listeners, Inscryption is a game that a lot of people feel like is better if you go in unspoiled. So if that's the case, you should probably turn off the episode now. I suspect that the mashup will also involve elements of what wants to be unspoiled. So have a good week. Subscribe. My side quest next time. We'll see you then.
I mean, with that said, if you're really into games and have some sort of familiarity with Daniel Mullins' previous games, you do probably have an inkling of what the game is going to do, because this is an interest of his that has been in all of his, like, most notable games that have been released.
So Inscryption came out of a game jam, right? Originally titled Sacrifices Must Be Made. You can still download that. on itch for free if you want to get the proto version. But Inscryption, you are in a cabin. You, Luke Carter, the Lucky Carter. I hate that, by the way.
You don't know that yet, though.
Never mind. See, once again, like the reveal of character names, like, even in things that are concerned with spoilers, it's like, whatever.
Well, the Wikipedia puts it in chronological order, which is not how the plot reveals itself to you.
Fair enough.
In the game.
Fair enough. So, okay, fine. So you're a mystery dude in a mystery cabin playing a mystery card game.
Yes. The first thing that was notable from when I played it is you cannot actually select new game on the title screen. You can only select continue, which I feel like tells you a little bit about what sort of game you're going into.
There's a lot of gaminess.
Yes. So in this first section, you're introduced to this like deck building game essentially, where you have a bunch of like animals in your deck, and you play them on a 4x4 grid against this pair of eyes that is across from you, who explains the rules to you of like, animals can attack each other, and then any animals that don't have an animal across from them attacks the other player directly. And whoever tilts the scales to the bottom first wins that round. And then you're also progressing through a map in which you can get more cards, power up your existing cards, combine cards, do all sorts of things. There's various different mechanics, like special sigils that cards can have that make them do like different things in their attacks, and other complications. And then every time you finish like a map section, there's a boss fight, again, where the pair of eyes puts on a character of some sort by like using masks, essentially. And each boss fight has its own like gimmick that makes it more difficult.
That's how you can imagine Emma and I recording the podcast too. Sitting across the table. One of us is just a pair of eyes.
Yeah.
Thank you for explaining the mechanics of the game. I was reading about the game. I eventually felt like I got the hang of how it worked, but I was like, this feels like something that's probably very clear if you play the game, but that my eyes just... Sometimes when things get way into explaining the mechanics of games, I'm like the opposite of the IGN gamer who's like, just tell me about the gameplay. Sometimes when they like start trying to explain the rules to me, I'm like, head empty.
Yeah. So it's also a roguelike, so if you lose both your lives, you start over again. And the goal is to like get to the end of the map so that you win. And also, it's eventually introduced to you that you can actually get up from the table and look around the cabin, which is its own sort of escape room game, in which there are different puzzles around the room, some of which are you can give you advantages in the card game, and some of which can be solved by taking certain actions during the card game. So there's some like back and forth there between like being able to solve escape room puzzles by playing the card game and being able to be better at the card game by solving escape room puzzles. And you also have a few cards in your deck who will talk to you.
Which is normal for the tabletop games.
The stoat, the stink bug, I think, and then eventually like the injured wolf or something will sort of talk to you, and it becomes clear that you're trying to sort of get out of this loop of playing this card game again and again against this guy. Because if you do win the first time, you still start over unless you've solved like the necessary escape room puzzles to actually get out of the situation.
So it's time loops and mysteries here on the podcast this week.
Yeah. This isn't really a time loop more than...
I know it's not.
He's murdering you. He's murdering the person in the game, and then a new person starts over.
Fair enough.
Except it's the player, you know.
I understand.
Yeah.
And then eventually you beat the final boss, and that's the end of the game. The end.
Just kidding. You get
Pokemon
to watch...
time. Here's where the real spoilers begin, listeners.
Yeah.
If you've listened this far being like, this is fine, this is nothing I didn't already know, this is where the real spoilers begin. Stop now.
So you discover that you get access to these, like, recorded videos that a guy named Luke Carter, who runs the Lucky Carter YouTube channel, that's like a card opening channel, has posted, in which he got this pack of inscription cards, one of which had coordinates written on it, and then he found this, like, floppy disk and started playing it, and it booted up to this video game, Inscryption. And then it becomes clear that you, in fact, the player, are playing as Luke, because he will start to comment, like, over the gameplay when certain things happen. And during other parts of the gameplay, it will also take you back to see more videos of what's going on. And the game, after you finally beat the guy in the cabin, also shifts dramatically to become like a card-based RPG hybrid thing.
Because of course. Naturally.
Yeah. It is sort of hard to explain. I was watching one video talking about the design of it that's like, it feels like they're using like the magic circle idea of like, you know, you accept the mechanics of the game and play into them, and there's like an understanding there. And as the game, as Inscryption progresses, it's like the circle gets like wider and wider until it eventually like just includes the fact that you are sitting at your desk, right? Mm-hmm. Like you are part of the experience of the game, because it becomes less of like a deck building roguelike and more of like a, okay, I am here to figure out what is going on in this greater story that is making this game so strange.
You become a detective, if you will. But not one that's like really there. Perhaps a phantom detective?
Yeah, exactly. You're right.
But then you beat the Elite Four and you're done, right?
No. Then the Stoat, who's now P30 something, he's like a AI actually, decides it's his turn to take over the game, and then you go back to a slightly different version of the card builder and go through his boss fights instead.
And then you're done for real, right?
Yes. I mean, there's the ARG that a lot of people did, but that is also done, so you can just go watch a summary video of what the ARG is, if you want to.
Something about ARGs really turns me off. Like, I totally get why it makes so much sense with this game to have one, but I read about ARGs and something in me just, like, shudders.
It's because we're stupid.
I really think the formative... I mean, you live in Boston now, right? The Hunger Force teen... You remember this from when we were in, like, high school? There was, like, this, like, teen Hunger Force, Aqua Teen Hunger Force that, like, put some things around Boston to advertise the TV show, and they thought they were bombs.
I don't remember this, no.
Okay, well, never mind then. But, it's something about when I read about ARGs, I'm like, that's such an interesting idea. I would never want to be involved in this.
This one does not involve placing things at locations.
That's good. That's probably for the best. Yeah, those ARGs, I feel like the days of that should maybe be over.
I think the only, like, real location was the coordinates where the disc was buried. But of course, because a real-life disc wouldn't survive if you buried it underground, like, the people who went and buried it up, Mullins gave them, like, an actual one. It's like, that one doesn't work. Here's another one that you can use.
Nice.
But otherwise, it was like online, and through looking at Mullins, like the original demo for Inscryption that you can get on Itch.io is part of it, or other games that he has made. And this is just like also just the thing that he does. Like Pony Island and The Hex are his other two most notable games that are also about sort of like the meta-ness of it. And I think the Hex also had like a very small little ARG to go along with it as well. Yeah. So all of his games are about like video games, essentially.
It's interesting that games have reached the point where they're mature enough for that, you know? I feel like movies about movies, or movies even about genre, and TV shows about TV shows, like, exist. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I can't think of a lot of video games that are interested in... Well, I mean, obviously these exist. I'll say this and then people will be like, but what about this, and this? Yes, I'm dumb. But I feel like there are fewer video games that are interested in thinking about, like, what is it to be a video game and, like, playing with video game genres. And I guess it's because, like, the games have reached maturity enough that you can at least believe that people recognize roguelike and Pokemon as, like, genre.
I mean, there is also, and you see this in all of Mullen's games, there's also just, like, in terms of, like, a video game being aware it's a video game, there's, like, I guess it's like this with all things, like movies that are aware of being movies as well, but there's, like, a horror element to that, right?
Right.
Like, that's sort of like, man, that's kind of... that's kind of scary. And I feel all of his games take a turn into like, wow, that's kind of scary. Eventually. Because it is indeed scary.
I feel like I said sometime in the last year, like, oh, there aren't that many horror video games. And now we've talked about, like, nothing but horror. Like, every episode has had a horror game for the past year.
Yeah. It's my biased filling of the hat.
Well, you did it to make me look stupid, which is fine.
No, it's like I didn't do horror games at first.
Yeah.
Because we do not play them.
But you played this.
I did play this. It is not like jump scare horror. It is just like, that's freaky, man. Sort of horror. So, it's really jump scares that I cannot handle.
So Inscryption was overall quite well reviewed, although there's a substantial portion of the reviews that are like, the first act is really, really, really great, and then the rest of it is not as interesting.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting in that the game mechanics that are set up in the first one are so, like, fun. That I feel like it almost works against the game because it's so fun to play that first one.
Yeah.
And then the way that the others work are, like, interesting. There's, like, interesting differences and interesting mechanics introduced, but it's not as fun as the first one. To the point where there's an official mod called Casey's Mod, which is called that because of story reasons, in which you can just play like an endless version of the first part of the game. Because I feel like maybe he slightly accidentally made a really compelling roguelike game.
I feel like that's the curse of trying to be meta, though, is that oftentimes, right, it's such a fine line to walk of once you're trying to get meta, is it less fun? Right? Does the commentary that you're making sort of take precedence over making something that continues to be fun? And, that's fine, right? We should have probably more tolerance, as we talk about on the show all the time, for games that don't have to be fun all the time. But it is sort of tough when your big twist also takes away what seems to be the most, enjoyed part.
What's interesting about it, I feel like, is it's not like the mechanics in the second and third parts aren't fun. It's just very easy to break.
Yeah.
And it's not like the first game was that hard to, like, break either. But because there was the element of having to reset when you died, there's a constant element of building your deck, and that does not carry over to the second or third parts of the game. There's no more resetting your deck and starting over and trying something else. So, like, I managed to get... There's, like, this Ouroboros card that you can get where every time you kill something with it, it gets a permanent boost to its health and attack. So you just,
That you just end the game.
Yeah. I mean, they're like hidden away in secret parts of the level, but I still got it and I used it and it was like, well, here's my Ouroboros. The real challenge in that is because in like the third part, you get so many gosh darn cards because your deck never resets. So I swear I had like 50 cards in my deck by the end of it. It's like, okay, when can the Ouroboros come up? I would like the Ouroboros to be drawn now.
Yeah. It's such a fine line to walk, though, right? Because you need the beginning of your game to be fun, to draw people in, but if you're going to make a big change, you also don't want your first part of your game to be the funnest. So...
I will say the third part has, like, interesting, interactions with, like, the meta-ness of it, I guess, in terms of the boss fights. Because the boss fights you do are helping P03 with his great transcendence plan, which he does not explain to you until the end. But, like, one of them, like, has you use your files, like your actual desktop files, to make new cards.
Oh, freaky.
So, like, the bigger the file, the better the card. Or in one of it says it asks you to pick a file that's really old and dear to you. And it says it will delete it if it dies. However, it cannot actually do that, I think because it would be malware. So instead it copies the name of the file, adds a txt, and it's just a note from P03 saying, okay, delete this. It's only fair. And apparently if you do delete it, you get, like, an achievement and like a bonus in that fight, which is really funny. Or there's another boss that, like, is connecting to the internet, and it will use, like, images from the internet and your Steam friends to fight against you.
So you just have the whole Packet family then.
Yeah. And also, you're able to make your own card that will upload to the web, and so then you can pull other players' cards that they've made to use on your side, and also you can either send them a good card or you can send them a really awful card if you are feeling spiteful.
Well, we all know summons are cheating, so...
Yeah, exactly.
It is also interesting to me, you know, kind of looping back around to the beginning of this discussion, what games get sort of decided in the mythos of, like, it's so important you're not spoiled that even our review can't talk about the spoiler.
Yeah. I mean, it's also interesting in the fact of, like, which ones are, like, we can't talk about it because we think it would ruin the game, and which ones are, like, we can't talk about it because the developers think it would ruin the game.
Yeah.
Right? In terms of embargo restrictions.
Yeah. But it was interesting to me. Again, it's like just that, like, sort of, like, critical consensus of sort of, like, all of the reviews were like, we won't talk about this, we won't talk about this. And then there were a few that did, and I was like, come on, dude. Bad form.
Well, we eventually got to have a review that did, as long as you warn about it.
No, I know. But there was one where it was like, it was in, like, a sidebar. It was like, okay, here are the spoilers. And it's like, well, I can't, like, what am I going to do? Like, block that part of my screen? Like, how do you think eyes work? So, you know, spoilers abound. Are you ready to mash?
I'm ready to mash.
It's tough because Inscryption already sort of feels like a bad Talk This mashup.
Yeah, it is literally, and I think the Hex is like this too. It is literally like, he's like, okay, it's a different genre now.
Yeah.
So it's like you would take two games, and it's like, okay, you play this one, and then you play this one.
So it's got to be ghosty and sort of spooky, and
Sure.
like you're like discovering things kind of element.
Mm-hmm.
We just add a fourth act that's an adventure game.
I don't think that would work. Okay, so you're a guy. You don't know who you are. right? Because it both sort of starts with some sort of mysterious element of like, who am I, right? And you find yourself. I got nothing else.
What? Give me
I was
something.
I was yes-anding myself, and I came up blank.
Okay, so let's like think through the beginning. So in Ghost Trick, you wake up dead with your butt up, and in Inscryption, you're in like a cabin.
Yeah.
Are you a dead guy, or are you? Maybe there's a twist at some point where you. Actually, probably the twist is you think you've been dead and a ghost the whole time, but you have not been. You are alive.
How would that even work?
No idea.
I feel like you would have to have it the opposite. I mean, I know that's more expected.
I know, but that's boring. That's the Sixth Sense. Speaking of spoilers.
I see dead people.
No, I think it's like, okay, so like you wake up, someone around you, like there's somebody else with you there who tells you that you are dead and you're a ghost now.
Okay.
I don't know what the gameplay mechanic is, but at some point in the game, you realize it's the reverse. And in fact, they are the ghost and you are alive. And any spooky things you've been doing have just been things that they have been doing to like convince you that you're a ghost. But then, at the end, you realize neither of you were really ghosts or alive in the first place because your character's in a video game. So it doesn't really mean anything for you to be dead or alive because you're just a bunch of pixels.
No. I don't think that ending. I don't think that ending is particularly true to either game.
I know it's not, but I was just like, here it goes.
I'm just trying to think of like the functionality of like how you would have story happen if you are alive but think that you're a ghost. Because it feels like as soon as you encountered another character, it would like give up the goat, essentially, right?
Maybe you don't encounter any other characters.
But then how do you have anything happen?
Look, it's not my job to figure this out. It's your job to figure this out.
Why is it my job to figure this out?
I'm just kidding. You're right. It does have to be you're alive, but it turns out you're actually dead. That's just such a boring twist.
No, I'm trying to work with you. I'm just trying to figure out how it would happen.
Well, what's the gameplay mechanic? Does this have to be a card game?
No.
Okay, so then it's like an adventure game, probably.
Sure.
Or like... I wonder if there's like some kind of like stealth game. This doesn't come from either of the games, right? But I'm like, okay, how are you around other people?
But like that's what I'm thinking. It's like, well, maybe they just don't notice you, but why would you hide if you thought you were a ghost?
Well, maybe you've been told you're in the ghost, like you're around a bunch of Ghostbusters.
Okay.
Like you wake up and it's like you're still visible to people, right? Is what you're told, but it's gonna freak them out.
Okay, so pulling off like the time limit thing that they tell you at the beginning of Ghost Trick, maybe it's like they're like, okay, so for a certain amount of time after you die, you're actually still visible, to people, and they can interact and talk with you, and that's sort of how this game lets you try to figure stuff out and do things. Is that you think that you're dead, but that you have like until like you have the evening to finish your last things on Earth.
Find out what happened to you. Close things up. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're selling it as just like a detective game, but then as the sun rises, like you've put the pieces together, but there've been like other pieces that are suggesting that like where's your body? You can't find out what happened to your body. You've been like looking for your body the whole time. And when you find a body, it's actually the guy who's been helping you the whole time that you thought was alive.
And then he's like just kidding, now I can take your body over.
Whoa.
And then you spend the next section of the game as a ghost, having to try and get your body back from this person that is now controlling it.
So, should... like, what's true about ghosts, I guess, is the question. So, like, the first half of the game, you've been like, okay, I'm a ghost, but people can see me, and it doesn't actually give me any powers, really. Like, you think you're using ghost powers, like, you think you're using powers to, like, persuade people, but you're really just, like, talking to them. But, like, what's real about ghosts? Like, can people really see ghosts? Or was that all a lie?
I think that was a lie, but ghosts do have, like, more powers. But I think that you find this out in the second part of the game.
Yeah.
Because the ghost that's, like, telling you to do things obviously wouldn't really want to be necessarily honest about how their powers work. Right?
And it probably lives in your cell phone or something. Right? Because, like, if it's a ghost, we shouldn't be able to see it.
Yeah.
So it's like someone who calls you. It's like, yo, you dead.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a third? Like, how does this end?
There's an epic Yu-Gi-Oh battle at the end, obviously.
Blue Eyes White Dragon.
Pot of Greed.
Nice.
Those are the two Yu-Gi-Oh things I know.
The end of the game is like, you have to go out and buy Yu-Gi-Oh cards to finish the game.
No, it does, there should be some sort of epic showdown that is, like, also, like, a different genre. But I don't know what it would be.
FPS.
Why?
Why not? Unexpected.
I meant, why are you calling my ideas BS?
No, FPS.
Oh. I heard you say, that's BS. I was like, I'm sorry, I've been putting some work in here. No. Just because I don't know what I should do for the last part.
In the end, it turns into a dating sim.
For what?
I don't know, you have to romance the ghost.
What?
I don't know.
We'll figure that part out when we get to it. How about that?
It needs a strong ending, but I don't know what that is. I
feel like we've made, like, a good, like, structure. Obviously, we'd have to think of, like, a plot. But I think there's a solid structure here for the
Probably
first
in
two
the
parts.
end, you, like, choose to live in the body together, so you have ghost powers, but you're alive.
Maybe. I don't know.
Little body horror to close it off.
I don't love that.
Me either, but, you know. Well, listeners, do you have a better idea for the ending of this game? Have you played either Ghost Trick, Phantom Detective, or Inscryption? And do you have thoughts about these varying degrees of spooky in different ways games? Do you wish there'd be a Ghost Trick sequel? Do you think that Inscryption was best spoiled or unspoiled or partially spoiled? Do you like card games? If you have thoughts on any of these things or anything else about the episode, you should hit us up on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can learn all about the show, check out the games in the hat, where Emma's about to pull our next two games, and visit our blog featuring a long-running series, Clickbait Boyfriend, and Split Screen. But most importantly, if you enjoy Talk This, you should subscribe. We are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts, online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Casts, anywhere you can find podcasts, wherever you found the podcast to listen to it today, you can subscribe to Talk This. So next week is side quest time. That means it'll be my choice. No idea what we're going to talk about, but something interesting. But Emma, in 2 weeks, at the end of March, what's the episode?
Our new game is going to be Trauma Center.
Happy?
That's our old game. I said new game, didn't I? Our old game is going to be Trauma Center. And our new game is going to be Ali Ali World.
Those sound very compatible.
Yeah. I love to perform surgery whilst skateboarding.
Honestly, that sounds like a pretty good mashup already. You need to do some sick tricks.
Yeah.
While doing open heart surgery. Well, listeners, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the show. Emma, do you have a good sign off?
This week, I hope that you open some good Pokemon cards.